Hey everyone, welcome back to the Shivering Mouse. I'm so excited to have you back here today. Today we're going to talk about C.S. Lewis's Chapter 9 of The Last Battle, part of the Chronicles of Narnia. By talk about, I mean I'm just going to go ahead and read it, as you can discuss yourselves, which will be fun, especially if you are kind of homeschooling right now. I know now we're towards kind of the endish of June. It's a little bit less of a concern to be making up for school time, but it is nice to slip a story into your daily lives. On a side note, brace yourself. I got new glasses. What do you think? Do you like them? They're almost exactly the same as my old glasses, but they're blue instead of black because I was feeling more summery. And now I have contacts, so I can alternate too, which is really fun. So much easier to do my mascara when I can, see my eyeballs. So, today, Chapter 9, The Great Meeting on Stable Hill. For a long time they could not speak, or even shed a tear. Then the unicorn stamped the ground with his hoof, and shook his mane, and spoke. "Sire," he said, "there is no need of counsel. We see that the ape's plans were laid deeper than we dreamed of. Doubtless he has been long in secret traffic with the Tisroc, and as soon as he had found the lion skin, he sent him the word to make ready his navy for taking of Cair Paravel and all of Narnia. Now nothing remains..." Oh, my dog's snoring. "For us 7, but to go back to Stable Hill, proclaim the truth, and take the adventure that Aslan sends us. And if, by a great marvel, we defeat those 30 Calormens who are with the ape, then to turn again and die in battle with the far greater host of them that will soon march for Cair Paravel." Tirian nodded, but he turned to the children and said, "Now, friends, it is time for you to go hence to your own world. Doubtless you have done all that you were sent to do." But we've done nothing," said Jill, who was shivering, not with fear exactly, but because everything was so horrible. "Nay," said the king, "you loosed me from the tree, and you glided before me like a snake last night in the wood, and took Puzzle and you and Eustace and killed your man. But you are too young to share in such a bloody end as we others must meet tonight, or, it may be, 3 days hence. I entreat you, nay, I command you, to return to your own place. I should be put to shame if I let such young warriors fall in battle by my side." "No, no, no," said Jill, very white when she began speaking, and then suddenly very red, then white again. "We won't. I don't care what you say. We're going to stick with you whatever happens, aren't we, Eustace?" "Yes, but there's no need in getting so worked up about it," said Eustace, who had stuck his hands in his pockets, forgetting how very odd that looks when you're wearing a chainmail shirt. "Because, you see, we haven't got any choice. What's the good of talking about our going back? How? We have no magic for doing it." And that was a very good sense, but at the moment Jill hated Eustace for saying it. He was fond of being dreadfully matter-of-fact when other people got excited. I kind of do that sometimes. When Tirian realized that the 2 strangers could not get home unless Aslan suddenly whisked them away, he next wanted them to go across the southern mountains to Archenland, where they might possibly be safe. But they didn't know their way there, and there was no one to send them with. Also, as Pagan said, once the Calormens had Narnia, they would certainly take Archenland in the next week or so. The Tisroc had always wanted to have these northern countries for his own. In the end, Eustace and Jill begged so hard that Tirian said they would come in with him and take their chance, or, as he much more sensibly called it, the adventure that Aslan would send them. The king's first idea was that they should not go back to Stable Hill. They were sick of the very name of it by now, till after dark. But the dwarf told him that if they arrived there by daylight, they would probably find the place deserted, except perhaps for a Calormen sentry. The beasts were far too frightened by what the ape and the ginger had told them about this angry new Aslan or Tashlan or whatever, to go near it except when they were called together for those horrible midnight meetings, and the Calormens were never good woodsmen. Pagan thought it might be that even by daylight they could easily get around to somewhere behind the stable without being seen. This would be much harder to do at night, when night had come, and the ape might be calling the beasts together, and all of the Calormens were on duty, and when the meeting did begin, they could leave Puzzle at the back of the stable completely out of sight till the moment at which they wanted to produce him. This was obviously a good thing, for their only chance was to give the Narnians a sudden surprise. Everyone agreed, and the whole party set off on a new line, northwest, towards the hated hill. The eagle sometimes flew to and fro above them, and sometimes he perched on Puzzle's back. No one, not even the king himself, except in some great need, would dream of riding a unicorn. This time Jill and Eustace walked together. They had been feeling very brave when they were begging to be allowed to come with the others, but they didn't feel brave at all now. "Pole," said Eustace in a whisper, "I may as well tell you that I've got the wind up." "Oh, you're all right, Scrub," said Jill. "You can fight, but I'm just shaking, if you want to know the truth." "Oh, shaking's nothing," said Eustace. "I feel as though I'm going to be sick." "Well, don't talk about that, for goodness sake," said Jill. They went on in silence for a minute or two. "Pole," said Eustace presently. "What?" said she. "What'll happen if we get killed here?" "Well, we'll be dead, I suppose. But, I mean, what happens back in our own world? Will we wake up and find ourselves back in that train? Or shall we just vanish and never be heard of any more? Or shall we be dead in England? Gosh, I never thought of that. Well, it'll be mum for Peter and the others if they saw me waving out of the window, and then when the train comes in we're nowhere to be found. Or if they found if we're dead over there in England." "Ugh," said Jill, "what a horrid idea." "Well, it wouldn't be horrid for us," said Eustace. "We wouldn't be there. I almost wish—" "No, I don't, though," said Jill. "What were you going to say?" "I was going to say that I wish we'd never come, but I don't. Even if we're killed, I'd rather be fighting and killed fighting for Narnia than grow up and old and stupid and at home, and perhaps go out in a bath chair, or then die and end up just the same, or be smashed up by British railways. Why do you say that?" "Well, when that awful jerk came, the one that seemed to throw us into Narnia, I thought it was going to be the beginning of a railway accident, so I was jolly glad to find ourselves here instead." While Jill and Eustace were talking about this, the others were discussing their plans and becoming less miserable. This was because they were now thinking of what there was to be done this very night, and the thought of what had happened to Narnia, the thought that all of her glories and joys were over, was pushed away into the back of their minds. The moment they stopped talking about it, it would come back and make them wretched again, but they kept on talking. Poggin was really quite cheerful about the night's work they had to do. He was sure that the boar and the bear, and probably all of the dogs, would come over to their side at once, and he couldn't believe that all the other dwarfs would stick to Griffel, and fighting by firelight and in and out of the trees would be an advantage to the weaker side. And then, if they could win tonight, need they really throw their lives away by meeting the Colorman army a few days later? Why not hide in the wood, or even up in the western waste beyond the great waterfall, and live like outlaws? And then they might gradually get stronger and stronger, for Talking Beast and Archenlanders would be joining them every day. And then, at last, they'd come out of hiding and sweep the Colormans, who would have gotten careless by then, out of the country, and Narnia would be revived. After all, something very like that had happened in the time of King Miraz. And Tirian heard all of this and thought, but what about Tash? And felt in his bones that none of it was going to happen, but he didn't say so. When they got nearer to the stable hills, of course, everyone became quiet. Then the real woodwork began. From the moment at which they first saw the hill to the moment at which they all arrived at the back of the stable, it took them over 2 hours. It's the sort of thing that one couldn't describe properly unless one wrote pages and pages about it. The journey from each bit of cover to the next was a separate adventure, and there were very long waits between them and several false alarms. If you're a good scout or good guide, you will know already what it must have been like. By about sunset they were all safe in a clump of holly trees set 15 yards behind the stable. They all munched some biscuit and laid down. Then came the worst part, the waiting. Luckily for the children, they slept for a couple hours, but of course they woke up when the night grew cold, and what's worse, they woke up very thirsty and with no chance of getting a drink. Puzzle just stood, shivering a little with nervousness, and said nothing, but Tirian, with his head against Jewel's flank, slept as soundly as if he were in his royal bed at Cair Paravel till the sound of a gong beating awoke him. He sat up and saw that there was a firelight in the far side of the stable, and knew that the hour had come. "Kiss me, Jewel," he said, "for certainly this is our last night on earth, and if I have ever offended against you in any manner, great or small, please forgive me now." "Dear King," said the unicorn, "I almost wish you had, so that I might forgive it. Farewell. We have known great joys together. If Aslan gave me my choice, I would choose no other life than the one I had had, and no other death than the one we go to." Then they woke up Farsight, who was asleep with his head under his wing, which made him look as if he had no head at all, and crept forward to the stable. They left Puzzle, not without a kind word, for no one was angry with him now, just behind it, telling him not to move until someone came to fetch him, and took up their position at one end of the stable. The bonfire had not been lit for long and was just beginning to blaze up. It was only a few feet away from them, and the great crowd of Narnian creatures were on the other side of it, so that Tyrion could not see them very well, though, of course, he saw dozens of eyes shining with the reflection of the fire, as you've seen a rabbit or a cat's in the headlights of the car. And just as Tyrion took up his place, the gong stopped beating, and from somewhere on his left 3 figures appeared. One was Rishta Tarkin, the collarman captain. The second was the ape. He was holding on to the Tarkin's hand with one paw and kept whimpering and muttering, "Not so fast! Don't go so fast! I'm not at all well. Oh, my poor head! These midnight meetings are getting too much for me. Apes aren't meant to be up at night. It's not as if I was a rat or a bat. Oh, my poor head!" On the other side of the ape, walking very soft and stately with his tail straight in the air, came the ginger cat. They were heading for the bonfire and were so close that Tyrion thought that they would have seen him at once if they had looked in the right direction. Fortunately, they did not. Tyrion heard Rishta say to Ginger in a low voice, "Now, cat, to thy post. See thou play thy part well." "Meow, count on me," said the ginger, and he stepped away beyond the bonfire and sat down in the front row of the assembled beasts, in the audience, as you might say. For really, as it happened, the whole thing was rather like a theater. The crowd of Narnians were like the people in seats. The little grassy place just in front of the stable where the bonfire burned and the ape and the captain stood to talk to the people was like a stage, and the stable itself was like the scenery at the back of the stage, and Tyrion and his friends were like the people peering around from behind the scenery. It was a splendid position. If any of them stepped forward into full firelight, all eyes would be fixed on them at once. On the other hand, so long as they stood still in the shadow of the end wall of the stable, it was 100 to 1 against their being noticed. Rishta Tarkin dragged the ape up close to the fire, and the pair of them turned to the crowd. This, of course, meant that their backs were towards Tyrion and his friends. "Now, monkey," said Rishta Tarkin in a low voice, "say the words that wiser heads have put into thy mouth, and hold up thy head." As he spoke, he gave the ape a little prod or kick from behind with the point of his toe. "Do leave me alone," muttered Shift, but he sat up straighter and began in a louder voice. "Now listen, all of you. A terrible thing has happened, a wicked thing, the wickedest thing that has ever been done in Narnia, and Aslan—" "Tashlan, fool," whispered the Tarkin. "Tashlan, I mean, of course, is very angry about it." There was a terrible silence, and the beasts waited to hear what new trouble was in store for them. The little party at the end of the stable also held their breath. What on earth was coming now? "Yes," said the ape, "at this very moment, when the terrible one himself is among us, there, in the stable just behind me, one wicked beast has chosen to do what you'd think no one would dare to do if he were even 1,000 miles away. It has dressed itself up in a lion skin and is wandering about in these woods pretending to be Aslan." Jill wondered for a moment if the ape had gone mad. Was he going to tell the whole truth? A roar of horror and rage went up from the beasts. "Grrr!" came the growls. Who is he? Where is he? Just let me get my teeth into him." "It was seen last night," screamed the ape, "but he got away. It was a common donkey, a common miserable donkey, and if any of you see that donkey—" "Grrr!" growled the beasts. "We will. We had better keep out of our way." Jill looked at the king with his mouth open and his face full of horror, and then she understood the devilish cunning of the enemy's plan. By mixing a little truth with it, they made the lie far stronger. What was the good now of telling the beasts that a donkey had been dressed up as a lion to deceive them? The ape would only say, "It's just what I've said." And what was the good of showing them Puzzle in his lion skin? They would only tear him to pieces. "Well, that's the wind taken out of our sails," whispered Eustace. "The ground is taken from under our feet," said Tyrion. Cursed cleverness," said Poggin. "I'll be sworn if this new lie is of the ginger's making." Next is Chapter 10, Who Will Go Into the Stable? Not me, that's who. I'll talk to you later.